Good afternoon, everybody. This is another edition of the Basketball Show, brought to you by JohnPaoli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. Next week, we're going to move into a couple different things that we're going to try. Good news, the show will continue to expand. We're going to be bringing in a couple more advertisers. We're going to bring the phone lines back. We're going to start doing interviews. So these are all things that are going to be coming back to the show. A little bit of, obviously, an apology for the last couple weeks, which we haven't been able to go on as consistently as, the intention was. So we're going to get into some topics. We're going to talk some stuff about baseball, a little bit about LeBron's mistake, and then we're going to have our Nobody's Listening segment, which we'll have towards the end of the show. Today, we're going to talk about liking your own post. But the first thing I wanted to touch base on and talk about today, a rare opportunity in what has been a lost season for the New York Mets, and of course you got the trading deadline for players to be added to and be eligible for a postseason roster in just a couple days. Lucas Duda was just traded to the Braves, so you're going to see a couple of the teams that are making a run or consider themselves in it in regards to trying to land a playoff spot, potentially improve themselves a little bit over the next couple days. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. Some people in my inner circle have asked me, they want me to comment on Zack Smith's statement as how he kind of went after the guy who put the report together for ESPN, Brett McMurphy. I want to research it a little more. I want to get a little bit into some of the details and the things that were mentioned before I comment further. Obviously, I made some comments last week in regards to how I feel about the Ohio State situation and Zack Smith. Zack Smith, for the first time, is speaking up, and he's got the chance and the right to defend himself. So I have no issue with anything that he says if he wants to bring positivity to his name. And obviously his name has taken a tremendous hit, a name which I've said before nobody knew anything about. So anytime anything's spoken about this man, it's in a very negative way. And I think the rights that he has as a human being, as an American, is to defend himself, to make his own case, to defend the statements that have been made against him. Obviously it paints him as a wife beater, paints him as a very bad person who obviously was terminated from his job as being an assistant coach for Ohio State. And obviously my opinion about it was, the fans, the people in the media, the people in the general public want to make this more about Urban Meyer than it is Zack Smith. So what I'll say is, Zack Smith's got the right to defend himself, and we'll see how his comments end up impacting this story. Now, he claims he didn't hit his wife, which is another, twist into which has become a complete soap opera. And let's be serious, if you're into gossip and slander, and he said, she said, this is a case that now has many more twists and turns in it. So if that's something that, appeals to you, if you want to watch a soap opera, if you're interested in General Hospital, One Life to Live, WWE, per se, then this is a story that's certainly going to have more, leaps and, peaks and valleys and kind of being on a roller coaster going up and down. But the first thing I wanted to start out by talking about today was, the possibility that the New York Mets may not activate David Wright for any time in September. Obviously, you're looking at a lost season. You're looking at a year that just, based off of expectations, certainly has not gone the way the team has expected it to. Obviously, from the ownership down to the front office, you have Sandy Alderson, of course, having to step away because of reoccurrence of his cancer. Mickey Callaway, as a manager, is kind of, you're not really 100% positive or negative based off of whether he could be a major league manager going forward. So you have all these different things, and if you're a Mets fan coming into September, you want to think of a couple positive things that you could possibly see. Of course, Tim Tebow, his injury, which ended up destroying his season, so he's not a possibility. You can't see him in the month of September, which I believe the Mets would have pushed towards if he'd continued to hit. You know, he moved up to AA and then AAA. He was putting up some decent numbers, and it just turns out that, you know, his injury is going to cost him the rest of the season. So the possibility then can exist of David Wright coming up to the major leagues and making a cameo, playing in a couple games, playing in a handful of games. And obviously, if you're a fan of the New York Mets, you're going to gravitate towards that. You're going to be interested in seeing it. You know, who other than the New York Mets captain, the guy who has been pretty much the icon of the franchise over the past decade plus, the past, 15 years since he made his major league debut in 2014. And the guy is obviously busting his ass. He's doing everything that he needs to do to try to get back on the field. He's dealing with spinal stenosis. He's dealing with rotator cuff issues. He's dealing with back problems. He's dealing with, neck problems. So all these different things have made it very compromising for him to be able to do simple tasks like go through a morning workout, throw the ball, hit the batting cages. So he's getting himself to a point where he's been playing in single A. He just got moved up to AAA, where he'll probably finish out the season for the Las Vegas 51s. And now you hear in acting general manager John Ricco's voice, in the way he's expressing himself, that there's a little bit more to John Ricco saying it may be unlikely that David Wright plays for the Mets this year. And this was what I had stated earlier, and I was talking about it, and I was talking about how the Mets continue to talk about how 75% of David Wright's contract is covered in an insurance policy, and as long as he doesn't play, the Mets continue to get 75% of what would be David Wright's salary. And I was hoping that this would be fair. I was hoping it would get to a point where you say, if David Wright is healthy enough, if he passes through these proper tests, he goes through his rehab assignments, plays effectively in games, and shows that he's ready to return to the Major League Baseball diamond, that he'd be back on the field. But now you're starting to realize what this is going to be about. It's about the fact that David Wright's injuries have compromised his performance. And because of that, at his absolute peak, he will never be the David Wright of old. Because of that, he is overpaid based off of the contract that he signed with the New York Mets. And obviously being overpaid is going to impact the New York Mets as his employer more than anybody else. The Mets are pissed off about this. The Mets may look back at it and say it's just an unfortunate situation, but now they're making it more about the money than they're making it about the player. And the Mets would rather continue to receive 75% of David Wright's contract through the insurance policy than make a proper decision over whether he is healthy enough to play. And I got an issue with that. I got a major issue with that. Not just being a David Wright fan, which is hard not to be. If you root for the New York Mets, you're very likely to be a David Wright fan. Here's a guy that has only done what's right in the mind of the New York Mets throughout his entire career. He's been the team's spokesperson. He has spoken to the media in very difficult times. He's always the first player after a loss to get a soundbite from. He has worked well with younger players. He has never once been involved in anything that you would say brought a negative image or negative vibes to the organization that he represents. And this is how the New York Mets are going to repay him at this stage of his career. Now, he's already missed an entire season of 2017. He has already missed the equivalent of another full season between 2015 and 2016. So you're talking about less than 30 days or less than 1 month where you could possibly be able to play on the field. And the Mets are going to hold him back because they want to make sure that that last month of what his contract would be, and he'll be paid about $3 million for the final month of the season, the Mets want to receive about, what, 2.25 of it? They want to receive 75% of his salary being paid back towards them. And there's something wrong with that, because there's integrity involved there when you're talking about a guy that has done nothing but the right thing through the organization. And this is how he gets repaid. So if the Mets are going to try to spin this in any way and say, hey, he's not gotten enough at-bats, well, he's going to get a chance to see a higher level of pitching in AAA. And over the course of this next week, if David Wright gets himself comfortable, swinging the bat well, is playing good defense at third base, which, by the way, he's been playing 9 innings in the majority of the games that he's been playing lately. If he's able to pass through all these tests, the Mets are going to look very foolish by not allowing him to suit up and play in a game for the team in September. And once again, a September in which, from the Mets fan standpoint, they have no reason to go to a game. They have no reason to show up at Citi Field for the final month of the season. Tim Tebow is not coming. David Wright, if he can make an appearance in a game or two, I promise you that's going to put fans in the seats and will make the investment worthwhile of the $2 million or so that you're going to have to forego in your insurance policy. The other thing I wanted to talk about in regards to the Mets, obviously there's been a lot of backlash of what would have been a third possibility, right? We talk about Tim Tebow playing for the Mets in September and what was and is a lost season. David Wright making an appearance coming back in the month of September would be a nice number 2. The number 3 would be the Mets' top prospect, a guy who's been tearing up both the Eastern and the International Leagues, the Pacific Coast Leagues, and that, of course, is Peter Alonso. He's got 33 home runs. He's driven in over 100 runs. He's certainly one of the top first base prospects in all of Major League Baseball, and the Mets have made a decision that they're not going to bring him up in the month of September. Now, I understand why fans should be upset. Fans, you can express however, whatever vitriol you want towards the Wilpons, towards John Ricco, towards the New York Mets as a franchise, but I actually side with the Mets when it comes to bringing up Alonso. The one thing that stands out that a lot of people that know baseball understand is the fact that he is in his second full season. He was drafted in 2016 in the second round. So that means that the Mets are under no obligation to have to put him on their 40-man roster. They don't have to do it this season. They don't have to do it in the offseason. And they don't have to do it next season. Now, the question's going to be, how much of the Mets' future is Peter Alonso? Is he the distant future? Is he the very immediate future? Does he give the team the best opportunity to win right now? And guess what? In a lost season, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're getting a chance to put the best team on the field at this given moment, because there's nothing to play for. So it's not about the Mets putting the best team on the field right now, because they don't have to. It's September of a lost season. So that doesn't matter. Now, you want to use, for a 40-man roster standpoint, perhaps get a chance to protect some other players in your own organization. You want a chance from a 40-man roster standpoint to potentially go out there and make some moves and upgrade your team and put the best team you can on the field for 2019, I'm okay with that. And you know what? To do that, you don't need to have Peter Alonso on your 40-man roster. Now, it's determined that he gives the team the best chance to win. That's a decision for the Mets to make next year. They don't have to make it right now. The last thing I want to talk about with this is you're talking about the Mets' first base situation. You got Jay Bruce playing there. You got Wilmer Flores playing there. You got Dom Smith, who's going to be back up, maybe given an opportunity to play there. The one thing that Peter Alonso did through his performance, and the fact that he was doing a pretty good job hitting all those home runs, I have an issue with what it's doing for Dominic Smith. Now, Dominic Smith could have been passed up. There's a possibility that he could have had his chance at the end of last season, this season playing in the minors and in the major leagues, and he could have had an opportunity. That opportunity could have passed him, and this could be Peter Alonso's opportunity right now. I understand that. But the Mets have an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that Alonso doesn't need to be added to the 40-man roster. You can take a look at Dominic Smith through the month of September, play him at first base like you did last year, and at least come out of the 2018 season with an idea of what you think this player is. It's a diminished player over what we thought we were seeing last year at this time. But you've given him an opportunity to play a position. First of all, he's a first baseman. He's not an outfielder. So for those of you that are saying, hey, call up Peter Alonso and play Dominic Smith in left field, you're not going to get the full understanding of what you have in Dominic Smith unless he's playing his primary position. And his primary position is at first base. So the best decision for the Mets going forward, unfortunately, as much as it would be good to see Peter Alonso play at the major league level, would be to play Dominic Smith the majority of the time at first base throughout the month of September. And if he continues to stumble the way he has stumbled over the last year or calendar year or so, then that decision is affirmed to you a little bit more, that maybe it's time to move on. Maybe this player isn't what you expected him to be when he was taken, 11th overall in the 2013 draft. So, you have a chance to assess a player that's still here and having him play the position that he is meant to play. So I think that's a good decision. Now, unfortunately, I get why fans are going to be upset. In a season that there's very little to look at, fans can say, hey, we've seen enough of Dominic Smith. And while I agree with that, you're not going to see him at his best if he's playing left field or if he's playing right field. You give him a chance to play a handful of games at first base. Sure, you want to move him to the outfield occasionally. I get that. You're still trying to win games, even though these games don't matter. But if Dominic Smith gets a chance through this month of September to play some first base, maybe you see something out of him that you haven't seen in the last calendar year. Maybe he shows you the plate discipline that you thought you were going to see when he was drafted out of high school in California. Maybe you'll see the fact that this guy is not that much of a power hitter, but has the ability to spray the ball around. He's going to strike out, but he has shown propensity at times in the minor leagues to have a good eye at the plate. He has shown to be a pretty good defensive first baseman. These are things that we haven't seen at the major league level yet. So in a season that's completely lost, I think it's a good opportunity to at least make a decision over what you have in Dominic Smith. And if Dominic Smith can show you that he's a little bit closer to the player you thought he would be than the player that he's been over the last 365 days, then you could certainly, if you want, start him at first base opening day next year. If you want, you can hold back Peter Alonso a little bit more, 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so, and then you could get that extra year of arbitration eligibility out of him. I know fans don't want to hear that. We think about Chris Bryant being held back the way he was, but once Chris Bryant came up and played in the major leagues and won the Rookie of the Year award, and in his second year won the National League Most Valuable Player, everybody seemed to forget about the couple weeks he had to sit in the minor leagues. But if Dominic Smith can play, then you know what? He gives you a viable option at the position. And you know what? If he proves he can play, then he may become a trade chip, something that he certainly has no value as right now. So there's a couple positive things you can see out of playing Dominic Smith. Now I understand, once you see a player and the player is not getting the job done, and the player is underperforming, the player is playing nowhere near what was expected when this guy was regarded as a prospect, when all these things are not going right, it's easy to be down on that player. It's easy to look at that player in a negative light. It's easy to think, you know what, I've seen everything that I need to see in this player. What else is there to show? And I get it. But playing Peter Alonso right now, outside of giving fans something to see, is not a good business decision. And it just makes the most sense. And listen, the Mets, in a lot of regards, have made wrong decisions, have made mistakes, have sounded pretty silly in some of their assessment of different situations. So, can you trust the organization? I understand. If you're a diehard fan of the New York Mets, you can't trust any decision that they make because they've proven to be wrong in so many different instances. I'm telling you, in this one specific instance, they're right. They're right not to bring Peter Alonso up. And I understand, the agents got jobs to do. And, you have agents that few people have ever heard of. In fact, Peter Alonso's agents are probably known by less people than people that know who Zack Smith is. Obviously, you know who Zack Smith is because of his involvement in this scandal at Ohio State. But before that, nobody knew who he was. Now, Peter Alonso's agents, nobody knows who they are. They go out there and they go on this tangent, speaking, kind of putting down the Mets, and potentially creating maybe too much praise for Peter Alonso, maybe hyping him up to maybe be a little bit better than he really is. He is not one of the best prospects that the Mets have ever had. We'll see that when he comes up to the major leagues. It's inevitable. At some point that will happen. Once that happens, you could make that decision over what Peter Alonso ranks as far as being one of the best Mets prospects in the history of the franchise. I mean, is there a guy named Seaver? Does he ring a bell to you? Gooden? Strawberry? Wright? I mean, these are prospects that seem to be a little more accomplished than what we're making Peter Alonso out to be. So before we make him the second coming of Darryl Strawberry, before we make him into the next Seaver, let time pass. Let him present his case as far as what he is as a prospect. It's not going to happen this year. It doesn't need to happen this year. Take a look at Dominic Smith, and by the end of the season, if you're tired of looking at Dominic Smith, hopefully the Mets will be too. And then we'll talk about the Mets off season and what players they're going to get. Because this is a team that, by the way, after such an atrocious season that they've had this year and a bad year last year, says it wants to be contenders in 2019. Well, listen, you got a long way to go if you're going to be a contender next year. You better spend some money. Once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. Glad to be with you. Once again, next week, probably after Labor Day, we'll start being on a little more consistent. We're aiming for about 4 or 5 days a week. We'll bring back in some sponsors. We're going to take some phone calls. So a lot of different things that we're going to bring back to the show as we get set for Labor Day, which is this Monday. Now, I was praising a couple weeks ago, LeBron James for everything he did, putting the I Promise school together. And obviously, from a social awareness standpoint, he is certainly conscious of what he considers his upbringing, where he wants to give back to the community, wants to give back to the inner cities. And this is all stuff that I've applauded, and I think it's a very good thing for him if he wants to in his secondary career, be kind of one that, just kind of wants to give generations of kids opportunity that they don't have. Now, I don't know if anybody's seen it. He's got this barbershop show, or this barbershop, where is creating a different kind of image of him. And in the end, LeBron James has the ability or the right to do whatever it is he wants. This is a man that is well accomplished, obviously the best player of this generation in the National Basketball Association, one of the best players perhaps of all time, a guy who has been to 8 straight NBA Finals. He has certainly been one of the best players that we've ever seen. He's accomplished because of what he gets paid, and certainly in a time where NBA players are getting paid more than they ever have in the history of the sport. So this money that he's got, he's obviously going to take care of his family. He's obviously going to give a lot back to the inner cities. He's going to charter his school. He's going to make sure that kids that are growing up have the opportunity to get through high school, to potentially go to Akron University if they want. He's going to pay for it. So these are all good things that he's doing with his earned money. Now, being the player that he is, he certainly deserves the amount of money that he's getting paid. And the amount of money that he's getting paid, it's up to him how he wants to spend it. And he wants to involve himself with this barbershop, which honestly, is pretty much smut TV. You know, a bunch of people, you know, essentially in a locker room setting, you know, dropping F-bombs, saying words that I don't ever want to hear said again. I can talk about the offensive standpoint, but the thing that I have to question is, what are you looking to get out of this? Now, there may be people that like the show, and if there is, hey, you got the right to like it. But we also live in a society where things are not brought to the forefront that should be. You know, you could go back in one of my favorite movies of all time is Back to the Future. And I like how they go from the different settings. You know, they go from 1985 to 1955. And I throw that out there because I think there's a lot of people in society right now that need to jump back about 20 years or 30 years or 50 years and realize the way that a lot of people conducted themselves then. Now, I'm not talking about relations in regards to race. Obviously, we've made, you know, tremendous strides, but have a long way to go. But what I'm talking about is the way people communicated the English language. Swear words, which have gone by the wayside now. Nobody looks at words when they're heard and say, hey, that's a word that I didn't want to hear because of the connotation of it or because it was a curse word. But curse words years ago were censored. They were also refrained from using for the exception of extreme circumstances. Your television was completely FCC regulated. Your radio stations were completely FCC regulated. So if anybody was going to use a profanity, that word would be bleeped out, or in some cases, the context of the word, where it started and where it finished, was taken off the air altogether. But now we live in a society, a lot of it has to do with the internet, a lot of it has to do with cable TV, that it's not such a bad thing for somebody to swear. Now, I would prefer swearing be kept down to a minimum, and I certainly would not want to see or hear a discussion between people that's taken or done in a locker room like setting. Now, you'd have a problem if the president did that, which almost kept him from being elected. You have instances where there's people that have said such crude things and have had to deal with the consequences of what they've said. But if it's just people shooting a you-know-what, going back and forth, saying vulgar things, using the F word, almost 100 times, using, like I said, words that should be forbidden from the English language, it's not creating a good image. And I have a hard time understanding what LeBron James's motive is in putting this show together. And actually, I was listening to Jason Whitlock talk about it, and he hit the points right on the head. He talked about how it's, is this really what you want to be remembered for? Now, in the end, it's LeBron James' money. He has it. He's got the right to do whatever he wants with it. But I'm just questioning, is he making a mistake by doing this? Is there better ways for him to put himself out there on a forum than to have a setting in a barbershop with a bunch of people dropping profanities left and right? And once again, using words that should be forbidden from the English language. I'm just not sure that he's making the right decision. Like I said, a lot of positivity, a lot of great things going on with, chartering at school, taking care of kids, giving back to the inner cities. That's all good stuff. I'm not sure the barbershop is a good decision. Once again, this is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. The last segment we're going to get into is what we like to call Nobody's Listening. And, of course, we'll play the music in the background to get ourselves going. And nobody's listening is just a reminder that as we get into about 30, 35 minutes into the show, very few people are listening. And this is where I take what is normally sports talk and get into the discussions about stuff that's going on in the real world. We kind of went there a little bit talking about LeBron James, but we're going to get into it a little bit further as we completely escape ourselves from the world of sports and talk about, today, a topic that I think has a little bit of interest, because you have a lot of people that want to get themselves out there, want to have their own voices heard, want to go viral per se when it comes to, a post, when it comes to a video. And the goal of putting something out there now, as opposed to years ago, is about the attention that you get. Not just, hey, this is pretty cool, this is going on in my life, I want people to see it. It started with the movement into Facebook and social media, where people essentially have their own websites. It's their own identity through their pictures, through their posts, through things that are on their mind. They have the forum to communicate with other people. And within this communication has grown an entire generation now of people and kids that have this infatuation with what other people think about their posts or about their videos or about their pictures. And how is it that people now, as opposed to people before, got the chance to communicate with themselves? Now I look at this and I wonder if people are making mistakes with their choices of the way to involve themselves in social media. Obviously, it's a problem. You got people that have tweets, athletes that had tweets from years ago coming to the forefront. They're stupid enough to not go back in their history and delete what are, but of course have been made into controversial tweets. But, people out there want to, up to a certain point, get as much attention as they can over their posts, over their videos, over their, of course, the pictures that they want to share. One thing that bothers the hell out of me, though, is you're making a post, whether it's any form of social media. You want people to like it. You want people to endorse it. Obviously, a like is an endorsement over any one of your posts. And it doesn't matter which form of social media that you're using. Under no circumstances should you need to, quote unquote, like your own post. And I tell you, all I have to say, as we hit the concluding point of the Passball Show, cuckoo clock, the whole thing. This is the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. Once again, we're going to bring in a couple more sponsors next week. I'm looking forward to it. So, anybody that decides to like their own post is essentially embarrassing themselves. Is essentially saying that they want to count how many likes they have on a given post and want to add one of their own endorsements to anything it is that they say or post or view or show. And I tell you, it's pretty asinine. It's pretty silly to even want to do that. But it's also kind of putting up a white flag saying that I got some issues with myself. I don't have the confidence that people are going to like the content that I'm providing through social media. And in order to do that, I need to endorse myself because I don't think people are going to endorse me enough. And the only thing that I could say to that is if you have to like your own post, stop doing that and work on your content. Work on what it is that you're posting. Instead of posting a picture of a selfie in some weird position, in some weird spot that nobody's even going to care about, do something good. Take a picture of yourself at a homeless shelter, helping some homeless people. Go to a children's hospital. Spend some time with some kids that are less fortunate than you. Make it less about yourself but put yourself in a better light by doing something positive. And I promise you, you won't need to like your own post when you start doing some good things for others. We live in a society now that unfortunately is so obsessed with people and their opinions and what they get from other people and getting self-worth out of posting pictures and stuff like that. And it's become very selfish or self-serving or even narcissistic in a way. If you want to do good things, or if you want to get good reception from people, do good things. Help others. Post pictures of nice things. Post pictures that other people aren't posting. And when you see the same, normal post that you could just change the face and have 100 different people or 1,000 different people that are doing the same thing, you're not going to get any interaction. You're not going to get any more attention than any of those other people. So all I suggest, instead of liking your own post, make your post stand out. Look out for other people. Do some special things. Make some prophetic statements. There's a lot more you can do. Quick recap of the Pass Ball Show today. Are the Mets holding back David Wright? Are they keeping him from playing in the major leagues because they want to recoup 75% of his salary through their insurance policy that they have on him? Peter Alonso, I agree with the Mets not bringing him up this year. There's no need to add him to the 40-man roster until next year, so there's no reason to do it this year. Now, Mets fans may be upset. They should be. You get a chance to see Dom Smith, and I think those that want to see both Dom Smith and Peter Alonso because they're younger players, I think you're going to get a chance to see the best in Dominic Smith if he's playing first base. Now, have we seen the best of it? Maybe. Have we seen the most that we're ever going to see out of Dom Smith? Maybe. But if you're going to make an assessment going forward, if this is a player that you should have major league at-bats that are going to contribute at the major league level and are going to be an important part of your franchise going forward, I think you'd want to figure that out in the month of September. So I would think that it would be more beneficial to the Mets and their franchise going forward to see what they have in Dominic Smith playing first base in the month of September, and maybe wait until the off season and wait until spring training and next year in 2019 to figure out what you have at the major league level in Peter Alonso. I'm concerned about LeBron James, starting the barbershop series. To me, it looks like a mistake. Bunch of locker room discussion, profanities, words that should be forbidden through the English language, which I'm going to talk about that on one of my Nobody's Listening segments down the road. What words should be forbidden from the English language? We'll talk about that, I promise. And of course, liking your own post. Instead of having a narcissistic view of having to endorse your own posts on social media, why don't you spend some time doing something good? Taking a picture of yourself, helping out people in a homeless shelter, going to a food bank, helping some people eat, helping out some pets, at an animal shelter. Come on. There's more things that you could bring to social media that I promise you will get you a lot more likes, and you won't have to like your own post. We'll be back with you probably in a couple days. We're going to aim for a show either tomorrow or Friday, and I promise next week we're going to try to go from Tuesday to Friday. We'll see how it goes. We'll obviously let Labor Day go by and do its thing, but obviously we'll bring the phone lines back. We'll have some more guests on the show. So a lot of different things that we're going to bring to the Pass Ball Show over the course of the next couple weeks. But I can't do it without you. I can't do it without you, the viewer, you, the listener. So please keep your comments going. Please, bring up everything that's on your mind in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America. So we'll be back with you maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday. Stay tuned to Facebook Live, Periscope, YouTube On Demand, and of course SoundCloud. So we'll be pulling up some interviews on SoundCloud that I've done over the past year. I was totaling up the other day about 15 interviews I've done in the year of 2018. So we'll get them going on SoundCloud. I do want people to listen, please. Like, not to listen in a narcissistic view, but listen to the way that I conduct my interviews. Listen to the differences between the interviews that I do and what you hear on terrestrial radio or you see on TV. Try to bring a different element to it. So we'll be back with you, like I said, either tomorrow or Friday. God bless you, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.